Hello, Asheville. You're listening to Wpvm LP in Asheville, North Carolina, 103.7 on your dial, and globally at wpvmfm.org. And we are delighted today to have Alex Comfort, the wonderful Alex Comfort, here to discuss the new program that Western Carolina is setting up on how to hire nonprofit leaders that are truly effective. And so I'm going to go in a little bit about Alex and what why he's their chosen person to conduct this particular workshop for the community. Alex is a graduate of University of the South back in 1970. Then he went on to get a master's in medieval history at Duke University, and then he went into the Air Force and did a interesting job of with the nuclear program, and then he went to seminary back again at University of the South, and became a parish minister, an Episcopal parish minister for 9 years. And upon leaving the ministry, he became associated with the LSU Medical Center and worked there for another 11 years. And then he came to UNCA and worked at UNCA as their manager of their scholarship funds and other endeavors with for a good while. I think it was 11 years there. The LSU was a 4-year term. And then you went on to the U.S. Forestry Service as their director.
Hi. I was the executive director of something called the Cradle of Forestry Interpretive Association, which is the nonprofit that helps the Cradle of Forestry historic site out by the Parkway near Brevard.
So, Alex, you have been in the nonprofit area for a very long time. How did you get started in it?
Well, it's one of the things that I now know is that nonprofits come in a lot of shapes and sizes, and the area in the United States that has the most nonprofits are churches. So my years in church service, both full-time and part-time, was nonprofit. And then I've spent 33 years now as a nonprofit executive in one place or another. And as I've done that, I've always had an interest in helping nonprofits. For example, when people ask me to serve on their board, I often will say, well, I can't do that, but I can help you with your fundraising, which is what you want me for anyway. And so I've always done a lot of that. And 9 years ago, I went ahead and became a consultant so that now I help nonprofits with whatever problem they have in terms of raising money or hiring staff or just, board training, that kind of thing. And I also have done a good bit of teaching, and I teach a 4-day, what I call a 4-day fundraising boot camp that I'll do another one of those starting on August 6th at Western Carolina. But Western also asked me to do a day-long workshop on this topic of finding truly effective leaders for nonprofits on August the 30th. And I was intrigued with this. I cover it in my boot camp, but this has allowed me to dig a lot deeper into it and really think about how nonprofits get board members, executive directors, development directors, chief financial officers, and these kinds of people in terms of getting the people that really can do a job and really become effective and lead a nonprofit to another level. So I've loved nonprofits my whole life and feel that they're rather misunderstood in terms of what they really are and how they function. And so that's one of the things that I want to impart to the folks that come to this class.
So let me read what the description here. Nonprofit agencies make up 10% of our workforce. However, they have a difficult time getting leaders who can truly move an organization to another level. this workshop goes into new ways to get beyond the resume and someone who talks the talk but cannot make things happen. And so for the people on live stream, here is the brochure or the flag about it. And so before we get into more particulars there, let's talk a little bit about why you went into medieval history.
Well, I fell in love with it.
Uh-huh.
And I was a history major and just realized that you've got 1,000 years from 500 to 1,500 to investigate. And I became, at Duke, I wrote the first 2 chapters of my dissertation, which, depending on your point of view, blessedly perhaps didn't get finished. But I became interested in the medieval University of Paris and how it was an arbiter for both the 100 Years' War and how it helped out in the Great Bubonic Plague around 1378 to 1450. And so I studied that, and my only difficulty was that I didn't love ancient history as much as I love medieval history. And so after my tour in the Air Force, things came together, and I went a different direction and went into the Episcopal Seminary.
So tell the community what you did in the Air Force, because it's very interesting that you went from a master's in medieval history to what you did in the Air Force.
Well, I was an Air Force intelligence officer, and as such, I was in charge of helping the air crews of B-52s and F-4s deliver their nuclear bombs on target. And that would be bombs and missiles. And I spent 2.5 years at Seymour Johnson Air Force Base over in Goldsboro, and then with B-52s, and then a year in Kunsan Air Base, South Korea, with F-4s. And with all that, the air crews, of course, have to have somebody give them a map and a chart and some detailed things about what their bombing scope will look like. And that was my job, was to help them be able to see on the bombing scope what they needed to see and help them know when to let go of the bombs.
So when John McCain was flying his B-50, what was he flying?
I believe he flew fighter planes.
So, but they didn't necessarily drop the bombs.
Well, I don't know what he flew, now that you mention it. He may have been a drop bombs. I don't know. He got shot down fairly early in the conflict in Vietnam. That was about the same time. I was in Korea in 1974, and but anyway, some of our bombers went to Guam and flew missions in Vietnam. I didn't go with them, but they had wanted me to, but that's another long story.
So let me ask you this, since I have you in the hot seat here. Did we only bomb in Vietnam, or were we bombing like over in Cambodia and other areas? Or can you say?
Well, number one, I'm really not an expert on Vietnam. I do believe that history has shown that there was activity outside the parameters of Vietnam, which is the only place we said we were bombing. But I believe there were other bombing activities as well.
So, Alex, your experience in that particular field, I think, combined with your interest in medieval history, gave you an interesting, and your studies in the seminary has given you an interesting perspective, I would imagine, for being able to oversee and help nonprofits in this community do what they need to do.
I like to think so, but I think more than anything, a person who is involved, particularly in the fundraising aspect of it, number one, it's helpful if you really like people and are insanely curious, as I am, and just love hearing people's stories and what makes them tick. The bottom line in fundraising is that people give to people, and your cause is very important, but if the cause doesn't have someone that can tell the story of the nonprofit in a way that is compelling and exciting and meaningful, then donors are not going to be interested in taking some of their hard-earned money and investing it in your cause. And so a lot of what I've found is that I hope to be able to talk to most anybody about any topic. And so that just fuels me to keep learning and keep finding things out. And I've learned so much from my donors over these 30 years as they've told me their stories and the things that they've done. So I think nonprofits have to learn how to do promotion and how to reach the donor population in new and exciting ways. And for example, the surge in social media over the last 5-10 years has been one of the ways that that's now being done. So I continually try and help nonprofits with ways that will be uniquely beneficial to them. As a consultant, that's my job. Not everybody is going to run a thrift store, but not everybody is going to do a golf fundraising tournament, but lots of people do, and there are lessons to be learned from all of these experiences, and I love to sit down with clients, frankly, and find out where they're going, what's working, and what's not working for them. But what I found is that if you don't have the right leadership, you're really going to have a hard time, and number one, you're going to go through executive directors left and right, and that will just kill a nonprofit almost worse than anything.
So what is this class about?
The class is about taking several types of leaders of nonprofits, understanding what the nonprofit is in terms of its own market niche, and finding ways to get the right people in these key roles. It also includes the board, which the board of directors in many ways is a completely different group because they're volunteers, but at the same time, if you don't have the right leaders on your board, if you don't have the right board members, then you are going to spin your wheels and not be effective. So my goal here is to teach board members and nonprofit personnel how to run searches, how to read a resume, how to interview somebody and find out really what you need, rather than just looking around and saying, well, that person looks good and they're taking in air, so let's hire them.
So this, I have the article here from from Brevard that says that Western Carolina University's Office of Professional Growth and Enrichment will be offering several nonprofit workshops, and the first workshop will be on hiring effective nonprofit leaders, and that class is 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Thursday, August 30th at Western Carolina University's instructional site at Biltmore Park in Asheville. So why are nonprofit organizations different from regular companies?
I think the thing that I start with is telling people that we need to understand what the IRS says and really go from there. The IRS looks at a nonprofit and says it is a business. It is just a business that does not focus on making a profit as other businesses do. And because of that, we need to look at a nonprofit with a business eye. Yes, it is also in business or in serving people for a particular purpose to help whatever its mission is. But first and foremost, we need to understand that it is a business, and that, as you already said, Davine, the truth is that 10% of the workforce in the United States is nonprofit workforce. Now, you got to understand, that goes from UNC Asheville, which is a nonprofit, and Mission Hospital, which is the area's largest employer, are both nonprofits, down to the smallest nonprofits that one of my clients right now has no staff members at all. It's all volunteers. But the bottom line is that...
And that would be us, too.
Well, that's true. That's true. I hadn't thought about it. Aren't they paying you yet? So,
Only in grief.
right. But, you got to love those folks too. And that's why, particularly in the fundraising side, it's so important to find ways to help people invest. I always look at nonprofit people and I tell them, you have to have just a little bit of celebrity in you to do this work. You've got to understand that your donor base is out there basically saying, I can't do what you do. I can't even imagine doing what you're doing, but I can make money. And I can participate with you by helping you do your work. I'm working with SAFE, the domestic violence shelter over in Transylvania County right now, and the stories are pretty horrific. You have to be kind of tough to really hear the stories, but their support comes from people who say this is too important not to invest in. And so nonprofits, I would say, are both mission-centered and they are businesses, and we have to hold both of these poles in tension.
So what generally happens is nonprofits hire senior staff members.
Well, think about it a little bit with me. The bottom line is that when a nonprofit, let's say, loses its executive director, the people that the board knows that are there now are generally really good program people. And they may, let's use SAFE as an example. The people there may be some of the most wonderful people to help battered women or help the offenders as they do these days, or they may be really effective in getting out into the schools and teaching kids about sexual and domestic violence. They may not have a full skill set to be a 21st century executive director, because that person also has to do outreach in the community to tell the story, to get volunteers, to raise money, and to present a community face that's compelling and exciting. At my 11 years at UNC Asheville, it was interesting, also LSU Medical Center, I have seen the United States change at colleges and universities and graduate schools from hiring great PhDs who are wonderful in their field into hiring people who are good fundraisers. And if your university is going to tell you the truth, they are looking for a great fundraiser almost before anything else. And so why is it any different for a small nonprofit who looks and says, okay, we need somebody who certainly is good at program, understands program, can administer the people, supervise the people who are doing the program side, but we have to have that face of the community side also, so that they can get out and meet people and go to events and go to meetings and really represent the nonprofit in a public way. And so you have to understand, at least I would say, and this is prejudicial, I know, but when people look at me and say, yes, I'm an executive director and I don't know anything about fundraising, but I'm willing to learn, most likely that's going to be a long, difficult road, and that person is not going to succeed terribly well. But you find me a nonprofit that can work outside the box and say, here is a great community person that is likable, magnetic, and can understand and learn what our story is, you may have yourself the greatest executive director going. And all of us in this region are mourning the death of Dr. Belcher over at Western Carolina, who was a fabulous example of a man who knew how to do both poles of nonprofit work. He was a great example, and everybody loved him.
I was just thinking when you were describing what goes into this type of person that you're saying that you need, is those people don't grow on trees very easily.
And they don't, and that's part of the reality here. And so I have to be careful about telling clients and other people that you have to be realistic. But I would rather see a nonprofit get to the end of its search, not feel all that great about the finalists, and just start over. I know in hiring development people, and I'll tell you, the average tenure of a development officer in the United States is only 16 months. And that is crazy. Donors need to know somebody they can trust, somebody that understands the agency. And if you're constantly turning people over, you're not going to get anywhere. So the reality is, I know one time for me at UNC Asheville, I got to the end of a search for a development director, and I didn't like where we were going. And I shut the search down, started over again in 3 months, and all of a sudden the perfect candidate walked in the door and was there for over 20 years. So I just, number one, I think we have to be realistic about people. We are looking for human beings that in many ways don't exist, and we have to do little things like understand it. If somebody is coming from somewhere around the United States and they're living in Dubuque, Iowa, and they're 58 years old, and they call up somebody in Asheville, is that person sort of semi-retired to start with? Or are they really coming to this area to work hard and do everything they can to make this agency better? And so there are ways to find that out, but you have to be very intentional about it, and you have to be realistic about who you are and what you have to offer. It's really hard. So I don't mean to make it sound easy, but
No, you're not making it sound easy at all.
All right,
You're
well, that's
making
good.
it sound really, really, really hard.
Yeah.
Just to assure you.
Well, but I look at you. I mean, here's a person who all of a sudden had a passion for this, and you got in and you had the people skills and the background to come up with the business side and the personnel side and the programming side, and also understanding what your market niche is and how to do it. And that is, again, a great person who's got skills and passion, and they become a wonderful executive director.
Well, let me tell you, it's been a 4-year learning curve, and I'm not through yet at all. So, how do boards of directors factor into this hiring of staff?
Yes, well, I think it goes both ways. Boards of directors are in charge of the executive director primarily, and done properly, they're not in charge of the development director or the chief financial officer, and so you have to keep those lines clear. But the board hires the executive director and supervises that person. And my thing with boards is that I see too many boards that have poor flow with regard to their process of hiring or getting new board members. Too often I see a nonprofit just say, okay, who's rotating off the board? You become the nominating committee. Let us know who you want, who you've talked to and brought on board. It's the absolute wrong way to do it. And so it has to be a collective effort of staff and all the board to not make nominations for the board. And then along with that process, the staff and the board have to sit down and come up with a real list of what kind of person they're looking for. Because boards have lots of different roles, and so if care is taken in getting the right job descriptions, and if they adhere to Comfort's rule anyway of never letting one other person say no for someone else, don't go talk to him, he's too busy, he won't talk to you, he'd never join our board. How do you know unless you've actually spoken to him? Don't let somebody say no for someone else. And you do the process the right way, then you can get effective board members, and they can do their proper diligence on the nonprofit.
So, do nonprofits do a good job of recruiting good board members?
I think it's spotty. I think a lot of them do a great job, but at the same time, and I think the trend is more and more, for example, to have some kind of letter or memorandum of agreement as to that the board member signs before they come on board, so that more and more we're seeing nonprofits train their board members properly, and staff members, executive members tend to say, "Oh, anything you can do is just wonderful, and thank you so much for showing up," and you know, no, they're not necessarily doing a great job if they just come up to go to a board meeting and never say a word. So we've got to train them as to what we need. But as I indicated earlier, I think it's a lot better if we can be very intentional about what kind of person we bring on, what their skills are, and frankly, what their time commitment is. If they don't have time to do it and are not going to do it, please let's not ask them to do it. And so I spend a lot of time with both sides of it, the hiring side for jobs and the recruiting side for board members.
Okay, let me take a minute and give a station ID. You're listening to the new WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina, 103.7 on your dial, and globally at wpvmfm.org, and on our new app available from iTunes or Google Play, and you can download that for free. So, Alex, how important is fundraising for a senior staff person or a board member?
Well, I tell board members, number one, that they come on a nonprofit board, and the one thing that they've heard is that they have fiduciary responsibility for the agency. And most of them say, okay, that means I'm going to watch how you spend the money. I'm going to watch how you meet your budget. And I'm going to make sure there's nothing wrong with what's going on. And that is their fiduciary responsibility. But it's only half of it. The other half is helping the agency raise money. And there are many ways a board member can help with that process without ever asking another person for a gift. There are lots of other things they can do. But if the fundraising isn't there, the nonprofit's not going to survive. And nonprofits right now are desperately trying to replace state and federal grants that they are used to getting with private fundraising, and they are used to trying to figure out a new special event or a new earned income opportunity or something like that to not only cover their expenses but take them into their next level. And so a nonprofit has to be focused on fundraising, frankly, almost more than anything else. And while it feels good to hear the stories of what the programs are doing, that's fine. They need to know that, but they also need to understand that most of them, including the executive director and all the staff members, are involved in the fundraising process.
So these wonderful list of topics that we have just covered are going to be covered in the event coming up with Western Carolina University.
Yeah, it's
so you've given teasers here, but you're going to go into these things in depth and tell you
Yes,
exactly
yes.
how to do this and how to go get a whole bunch of money.
Right, and there will be things that people disagree with, and that's fine. I welcome that. And when I go to do a workshop, or when I go to workshops, I hope to come away with several good ideas, and that is the idea here. It is a how-to session from 9 to 3:45 on August the 30th, and that's at the Western Carolina offices off Biltmore Park. It's exit 37 off of I-26. And to register, someone would go to the website and it's go to the computer and put in learn, Learn, .wcu.edu. That's learn.wcu.edu. or if you care to call and talk to someone, you'd call 828-227-7397. That's 828-227-7397. And I'll also be glad to talk to you. You can look me up on my at my website, which is Mountain Nonprofit Solutions, and that's www.mn-ps.com. And you can contact me through there. I'll tell you more. But this is for board members. It's for senior staff. It's for volunteers. Anybody who really wants to make sure that you're doing the right thing and hiring the right people and not missing the red flags that can come up in the interview process.
Thank you very much, Alex, for coming in and telling us about this and helping to elevate the awareness of people and what to look for and how to watch for those red flags, because obviously in this community, we kind of need that.
We need great people, and if I may just say thank you, Davine, and I hope all your listeners realize that WPVM is an absolute treasure in this community. It is worthy of your donations. You can go online and donate that way, but this radio station needs to get better and better known, and it can do that if people will join them in that effort.
Well, thank you very much for coming in.
But you wouldn't say